Hi Colin.
Hello.
I really liked your lecture.
Good.
And there are some questions which came up in my mind. So, Colin, could you please explain a little bit what's the difference between traditional forgiveness and radical forgiveness?
Yeah. Traditional forgiveness is what we have been brought up to understand as forgiveness. And whenever I ask the question, has anybody tried to forgive, everybody puts their hand up. And if I say, did you find it easy? Nobody puts their hand up. And so traditional forgiveness is understood, universally understood, to be something very difficult to do. And that, in a sense, only special people can do it. Whereas what I'm bringing forward, radical forgiveness, is a way of anybody can do this, anybody. You don't have to be special at all. So what is the difference? The difference is that with traditional forgiveness, there's the underlying idea that something wrong happened. And even though that happened and it was bad and that person did that to you and you were the victim and they were the perpetrator, you're going to try to forgive them. And that's trying to balance two very contradictory energies. Forgiveness and the need to continue to condemn somebody, they're almost opposites. So trying to resolve those opposites is very difficult. So with radical forgiveness, we give up the idea that something wrong has happened. And we open up to the possibility that there is in fact a divine plan operating here, and even in the worst of situations, that there is something of a spiritual nature going on that is designed to bring our awareness to a higher level, if you like, or to help us to grow spiritually at the soul level. We're here to, as a human being, to have a soul journey. And so all that is happening is in service to our soul's growth. So that's the idea of radical forgiveness, and it's radically different to traditional forgiveness, because really what you end up with is the idea that nothing wrong ever happened, and therefore there's nothing to forgive.
But how you apply that to your daily life?
Well, that was really my sole aim when I put this thing together. I wanted something that people would be able to use in their everyday life. Otherwise it's just an idea. It just isn't worth it. And there are a lot of things out there that really just good ideas, but very hard to make real in your everyday life. So this was a really important thing for me, so I'm glad you asked that question. And the answer is that I've created a number of tools that we can use that help to keep us in that mindset or vibration. Because it is a difficult idea, the idea that everything is happening for a reason and everything is divinely guided. That's a very esoteric idea, so how on earth can we ground that when our consciousness is not really up to it? We're not really that evolved yet to live that daily. So we need some way to help us make the transition, to provide a sort of a bridge from our old paradigm of the idea that everything is just random, chaotic, and all that kind of way that we think of life occurring for us as a matter of luck or being in the wrong place at the wrong time, to the new paradigm of the idea that everything is beautifully orchestrated by our own spiritual intelligence, if you like. That is a difficult shift for us to make in everyday life. So when something happens to us, let's say, so we're in the car and somebody hits us from behind, it's very hard for us to say, oh, that's all part of the divine plan. Very hard. So we're going to go into our reaction and our feelings, which is good because we're human beings and we're going to have those reactions. But what the tools help us do is to be aware, unconscious of those reactions. And so we become more an observer of our life, an observer of ourself. And that helps to bring us back to the new paradigm, that even though this seems to be chaotic and a thing that I wish had not happened, and I notice that I have judgments about it, nevertheless there's part of me that knows that I have created this circumstance for a reason, and that I am, in some funny way that we can't understand, complicit in making that event happen. So it's the tools that make the difference in this particular thing. So when something happens, you automatically go for the worksheet or the CD and listen, or write the worksheet and go through the process. And that seems to shift the energy and create the bridge for us to go from the old paradigm to the new.
Mm-hmm. You just mentioned that you created that, or we create that. But how does that go together with there's a divine plan? And what's the responsibility part in that? So do we have any chance to create it, to really take responsibility for what we are doing, or is it all divinely guided and it happens anyway?
There's about 3 questions in there, so let me see if I can tease those out. The first question is about the divine plan. Does that mean that everything is set up before we even, before the moment? And my belief around that is that time is not linear at all. There is only the now. So the divine plan is unfolding in every moment. And we are part of that creative process of creating our divine plan in every moment. And the part of us that I talk about as having the intelligence to do that is what I call my spiritual intelligence. And that is the part that's connected to the all that is, whether we call that God or source or spirit. But that part of us, the spiritual intelligence, knows that and can tap into that collective intelligence, the collective spiritual intelligence. And so in every moment we're creating our divine plan. But it is a divine plan. It's all purposeful, and things are being created in those moments for us. And things are happening not to us, but for us in all moments, even though it doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
Now let me come to the responsibility one, because this is a big one for a lot of people, because it sounds like that with radical forgiveness, that since everything happens for a reason, then you have carte blanche to do anything you want to do, because it's all part of the divine plan. Well, you will soon be taught that that's the ego's idea. And the truth of the matter is that we are here as human beings, and we are here to play the game of being a human being, but we have to play it totally. So we cannot sort of get ahead of the game and say, oh well, I know that this is a spiritual game, so I'm gonna do what I want to do because it's all part of the divine plan. That doesn't work at all, and it wouldn't serve the divine plan for us to do that, and we would certainly get a lesson pretty quickly. And so we are responsible for everything we create in our life, and we are accountable for everything that we create in our life, just like any other human being. And if we get into trouble, if we get punished for doing things, then that's all part of the divine plan. So the way I conceive of navigating the human experience in the best possible way is to operate as much as I can from the highest principles of honesty, integrity, humility, tolerance, all those things that we consider to be of a high level in the way we relate to each other, will help us to navigate our spiritual lessons much more beautifully, if you like, than we otherwise would if we were operating from a lower level of greed, fear, anger, resentment. So our task, if you like, is to raise our vibration from those lower vibrations to the higher, so that we can be more aware of our spiritual growth and our divine plan, and be more in tune with it than we otherwise would. So radical forgiveness is not a recipe for licentiousness or freedom to do whatever you want. In fact, it asks us to be more responsible, more accountable, but to know that we're accountable at a different level, accountable to our spiritual intelligence or our spiritual growth, and to know that when we know that we've created the experience, we automatically become accountable for it, is what we have created. Does that answer your question on those? I think I've covered most of those things.
Yeah, there's one thing I still have difficulty with. When I look at the life, how it is today, and the world, and the people, it's really hard for me to see that there's perfection in it.
I know,
and the divine
it's
plan.
very, very hard for us. It's our old paradigm kicks in when we see things like famine and wars going on in the Middle East and people killing each other. How can that be perfect? And so it puts us back into that the paradigm that we know, which is that things are not good and it appears to be chaotic and it appears to be bad. So we have to, in a sense, practice. It comes back to that idea of using the tools to get us across that bridge to see that even in war, even in famine, even in child abuse, that there is something going on there of a spiritual nature that we do not understand and cannot understand. But when we open to that possibility, when we become more willing to say, well, maybe Spirit knows exactly what it's doing, and that there is a divine purpose in this war, or in this famine, or in this rape, or whatever it is, then that raises our vibration, and we have a positive effect on that outcome. And so the way to stop war, and the way to stop famine, is to raise our thoughts about it, and our perceptions about it, and get the lessons that are implicit in those situations. Then there'll be no need for them to be there anymore. So the beauty of radical forgiveness is that it not only helps us as individuals to, I hate to use the word heal because there's nothing wrong happening, there's nothing really to heal, but it enables us as human beings to come to peace, shall I say, about certain issues. But it enables us to see larger issues like social problems, political problems, war and peace, to see those in a different context as well, and to have an effect on them energetically such that we would begin to decrease the need for them to ever occur in the first place. So I really see this as a way, as one of the technologies anyway, that we can create world peace with. If we can hold the vibration of peace and harmony and love in the face of those things, we will have a much more powerful effect on them than if we make it wrong, and that we actually join the suffering if we then start to blame and we just perpetuate the same pattern of war and attack and defense and blame, resentment. We just continue that pattern, and it will just keep repeating itself. But if we as individuals can hold the vibration of peace and love and harmony, we will actually inject that energy into the situation and decrease the need for war. So my sense of it is that it would only take a very small number of people as a percentage of the population to actually create world peace and even heaven on earth.
So Colin, you made it possible by developing a training for people to become coaches. You made it possible that more people can use this method.
Yes.
So how did you develop that?
Well, it was really important to me, first it was very important for me to make this a practical thing that people could use in their everyday lives. That was really paramount for me. And then the second idea was, well, if it's something that people can use in their everyday life in a way that's easy and simple, then how am I going to get that out to as many people as possible that would have the effect of raising the consciousness of the whole planet, if you like, make the whole thing bigger. So, I wanted to train people to be able to speak about radical forgiveness and to show people how to use these tools that we have, the worksheets and all the other things, so that it would be a spreading out in all different countries. And the advantage of it is that it's a very simple system, so it's fairly easy to learn how to coach other people in the process, in using the tools. And as you know, we've set it up in a number of different countries, including Germany now. And you are taking that out into Germany for me, and I'm very, very grateful for that. I've got it also in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, in Australia, and a number of we're getting more and more countries now established, so that more and more people can do this.
That brings me to another question. I had very good results in using it with my clients, but sometimes I notice that it's not so easy to make this transition. They are so used to stay in this victim consciousness
Yes.
that they have problems really make this transition.
Yes.
How do you handle that?
The transition piece is somewhat difficult, and it's a delicate piece. But basically, what we're doing is helping people go from the victim consciousness, which is the old paradigm. And remember, we've been in victim consciousness now for centuries, 15,000 years, you could say. So it's not easy for us to shift into, especially when we're in the middle of our pain, to shift into the idea that something's happening for a reason and there's a divine order in what is happening. So we have to wait for that right moment when you think the person might have what I call a listening for that they're ready to receive that idea. But you have to be very careful to wait for the right moment so that that person doesn't just say, well, that's ridiculous, how could that possibly, I'm not going to take that, and then you lose your client. So I often just pass the book to them and say, have you read this book? And if they say no, I give them a copy and say, read it and see what you think. It's a different way of looking at what's going on in your life. But the first thing that is so important is to witness somebody's story and to hear their story and to validate it, that it happened and it was hurtful and it was painful. And so we need to really validate that first before we make the transition into the new paradigm.
Yeah, what I discovered for myself that it's not so difficult for me to forgive others. I feel very much in peace with my environment, but I'm very hard sometimes to myself and forgiving myself.
Yes.
So I'm very thankful that you created the 13 steps for self-forgiveness.
Yes.
And I use that very often, but the question is, do I have to use it again and again, or how can I use that? Because you said it's quick and easy, but I'm not sure about that.
Well, it's quick and easy to use. Whether the results come quickly is a matter of how much resistance you have to loving yourself. Because all self-forgiveness, in fact all forgiveness, when you think about it, comes down to self-love. And so the tools that we've created for forgiving others and forgiving ourselves, in the end, come back to self-acceptance. Because that's where it all starts. Our own self-hatred is projected out onto other people, and then we blame them, and so we set up this cycle. So it's all about self-acceptance in the end.
You told me about your plans to bring this to the business, when you say you can apply it to every aspect of your life. So you can also use that in your working life? Very
much so. Because we are always, when we go to work and we're interacting with other people, buyers, sellers, managers, that brings up a lot of our authority issues or mother-father issues and so on. So all those things get played out at work, and our spiritual intelligence actually uses those situations to help us to remove the energy around those situations, but that can be very costly to the corporation. Because we may have, the way I put it is, if you imagine somebody going to work with a briefcase, that's one thing he's carrying in, but he's also carrying in a tremendous amount of emotional baggage. And he's going to act that out at work. And everybody does, because that's part of being human. So what I'm suggesting to corporations is that they become more aware of that and then use the tools that I use in Radical Forgiveness to manage that kind of energy in a corporation, so that it prevents conflicts as well as helps resolve them. It raises morale and makes people feel more fulfilled, and the relationships become more meaningful in a corporation. See, up to now corporations have been very concerned with productivity, those kind of things, performance, but they haven't really been able to understand people's spiritual needs and emotional needs. And so now that's coming in, people are beginning to realize that we're more than just physical beings, we're more than just production units, we are spiritual beings, emotional beings, mental beings, and we've got to help people in the work situation to express all parts of themselves, and they're really ready now to see that the spiritual side of things is very valuable. So this is a technology that we can kind of just use different language but put it into corporations as a conflict resolution system and an energy management situation, and to make a big difference in their profitability.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, it's an exciting development.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
absolutely.
everybody goes to work, and that's where everybody is. So if we want to make the most change, then we go where there is the most people, and where people are obviously acting out some of their stuff and making troubles for the corporation itself. So it's exciting development.
Another thing I would like to know, I really love the ceremony.
Yeah.
For me, it's one of the key things in this whole work, and I really could feel the transforming energy when I experienced it and also when I deliver it. How did you discover that?
It was actually taught to me by a Native American. I mean, it's based on a Native American healing circle ceremony. And I've adapted it to use it with the radical forgiveness technology and to make it more acceptable to the European mind, because we think differently to indigenous people. So it's easier for indigenous people to walk the circle and to give it up to the great creator and so on. So we needed something else to help us to make that happen. But you're right, the ceremony is a beautiful way to experience radical forgiveness. And the beauty of it is, as you know, because you've done so many of them now, that it enables people to forgive almost everybody in a space of 2 hours. And they don't really know that they've done it until afterwards, because they feel so different. And as we know from the feedback we get, that their life changes as a result of doing it. And what it proves, of course, is that the radical forgiveness technology is all about shifting energy. It's not about solving problems, it's not about making things happen or changing circumstances. It's simply changing the energy that we have around that particular situation or that particular person, and it just goes. So, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. I love doing it. I never tire of doing it. I've done thousands of them all around the world. I never tire of it. It's beautiful to watch it.
It was really a pleasure for me having you here. Thank you very much.
Well, I just love being here, and I thank you for all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
The love that used to hold our hearts wants to take us beyond justice to